Australia to work and to live. We've got Darren, a visa expert from Visa Go, to field a lot of your questions today. He's an expert, certified authority on visas, so and absolutely itching to support anyone that is requesting support. So I'll just do a brief intro to myself. Some of you I've met or you've seen me on the webinar before. My name's Rowan. I get to work with these wonderful people. I'm in Copenhagen at the moment in a new office that we've just started, so supporting all those European educators that are keen to get down to Australia. I'm a teacher myself, and obviously in recruitment too. I've travelled and worked in multiple countries, taught in Australia, the UK, Sweden, international schools, public schools, private schools, primary, secondary, everything. So, and I love sharing stories about my travel and relocation. So not just about the job, but everything else that goes around the job to make your adventure fun. So that is me in a nutshell. Anika in Bristol.
Thanks, Ro. So hi everyone, I'm Anika. I might have spoken to some of you already or emailed with you. So I am the Bristol-based Global Opportunities Consultant. So I support UK and Irish teachers looking to make the move to Australia. I am originally from Canada. I am trained as a teaching assistant with a specialism in autism. I worked with ANZ UK previously in the past as a supply teaching assistant in both Melbourne and here in Bristol. I've been working with the company for 6 months internally now. So yeah, I've got a bit of the travel bug. I've done some traveling. As a Canadian who is married to a Brit, I can absolutely sympathise with the visa process. You know, trying to live in a different country, and Ro can also sympathise with this as well. You know, trying to live in a different country with a partner who's a different nationality, always interesting, and just trying to live in a new country, always interesting as well. But yeah, looking forward to being able to speak with you guys more.
And our visa expert, Darren Chat, up in warm, sunny Edinburgh.
Yeah, well, it is today. It's lovely. So hi, everyone, and thanks for coming along. I'm Darren. I'm a registered migration agent with the Australian government, which means I'm licensed to be able to give you migration advice on migrating to Australia. I'm based in the Edinburgh office at the moment, heading back to Western Australia to work in our office in Busselton, Western Australia in September. And we also have an office in London. And yeah, we just basically help people who are looking to go to Australia temporary or permanent, and just take out all the legal side of it and make your transition to Australia a lot easier. So happy to answer any questions that you have today about any particular visa, and also with Rowan and Anika. So enjoy.
Yes, it'll answer a lot of your questions as we go through the presentation, but there's certainly the opportunity for you to ask questions in the chat box or the question box. So feel free to type your questions, and hopefully we get to answer them. There'll be opportunities at the end of the presentation to ask questions of any of us as well. So there's just some contact information for Darren. If you wish to take a screenshot or a photo, you've got access to his website, and I'm sure he's available to talk to you at most times in his time zone. I just wanted to start off by giving you a bit of a landscape update, just to sort of share with you what is happening in our global network around travel, around jobs, around demand of teachers in Australia. Just post COVID, what does it look like? Are teachers in demand in Australia? So the short answer is yes. During the pandemic, lots of internationals left Australia, as you can understand, and left this huge hole in our workforce across all industries in Australia. And so the government have put lots of plans and initiatives in place to try and invite and welcome and attract people across all industries, health, education, hospitality, to come to Australia and to work in Australia. And teachers are certainly part of that scheme. So lots of incentives the government's been offering around pay rates, around bonuses for anyone that will go to a certain area of Australia, regional location or another setting that has a need for a certain type of educator. So it's certainly good news for you guys out there, knowing that there's going to be more jobs than ever in the education industry available to internationally trained educators. There's certainly more confidence in travel. I think we've got a slide about what does it mean to come to Australia post-COVID. I flew over to Europe about in May, and the only difference I saw was wearing masks leaving Australia. And when I left Australia, the only time you would have to wear masks was on public transport. Outside of that, everything's pretty much back to normal. And all the educators that we have supported in this year that have gone to Australia since December when you were allowed to go has been really positive. So we've, obviously primary teachers, secondary teachers, early childhood educators across Australia have just really enjoyed being there. After some of them had plans to go there pre-COVID and had to put them on hold, and others had made the decision during COVID that they wanted to be in Australia, and plenty of work. Were absolutely smacked by offers of work or requests for work by all our schools and settings in the middle of the school year right now in Australia. It is winter, nothing like a European winter, but it is winter, and it's typically the busiest time of the year right now. But for you guys out there, we're not necessarily talking about right now. We're talking about later this year. We're talking about next year, maybe the year after, when you think you might make the move. So, and just briefly, it is all types of schools. It is all types of settings that we work with, and I can tell you right now, there's lots of schools banging on our door every day saying, we need teachers. We have 30 vacancies today for a temp role, or we have 5 vacancies for contract and permanent sponsored roles, whatever it might be. Someone's on maternity leave, someone's retired, whatever it might be. There's more requests for educators by our schools and settings than we've ever had before. And unfortunately, we've had to say, no, we don't have the educators. We don't have enough teachers to support you. And that's where the conversation around sponsorship has been very critical at this moment. So settings that haven't typically thought about sponsorship are now thinking seriously about it, because they're not going to find the educators they need in Australia. So we'll talk a bit more about that, but I just wanted to share some feedback. Is there anything, Darren, that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, really just on the visa side of it, and what the Australian government are trying to do to get more people into Australia. I mean, now there's no evidence of being vaccinated. Unvaccinated can come into Australia. Like you said, I dropped my wife off at the airport yesterday. She's flying back to Australia, and the only requirement was basically that she had to buy a mask through WH Smith, because we didn't take one because we're so used to not wearing a mask now. So. So she had to buy a mask to sit on the plane and get out to Australia. It's pretty well open. And the Australian government, I mean, we'll go into this a bit more, but the Immigration Minister, Andrew Giles, came out last week and said that they're prioritising tourist visas, working holiday visas, and the temporary skilled visas to try and get people out and boost the economy, and also fill the gap shortages, because there's huge gap shortages in employment in Australia. So it's all positive. So if you're sitting outside of Australia and want to come, now is a great time to come, because all the barriers are down and you certainly are required. Yep.
Fantastic. And you've put some information about the government realising this need. So employing new staff in those immigration roles to support the applications for visas and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, during COVID, obviously Australia was closed near on up to nearly 2 years. So a lot of those people working for the government in the immigration processing visas had to find alternative employment, so they left. So there's been a bit of a gap there, but the Australian government, as you can see, have only recently employed 140. They're giving people more overtime to help process the visas and get through the systems. And the volumes are huge. As you can see, there's nearly 750,000 visa applications are being finalised in June alone. So it shows you the volume of people that are coming into Australia. But that's only the tip of the iceberg that's required. Australia still has huge shortages in employment. So the best thing is, if you're applying for a tourist visa or a working holiday visa or a temporary skilled visa, you're going to get priority. So probably about 4 or 5 months ago, a working holiday visa could have been taking up to 3 months. We're now seeing that the working holiday visas, some are coming through within 2 to 3 days and down to about 2 to 3 weeks. So the processing system has got a lot better. So that's really good news for those looking to head out there.
And I think majority of our audience today probably don't fit the working holiday visa option, but we'll certainly mention it. If you're a European, it's typically the 417. If you're from other countries, it could be the 462. But basically, you know, in a nutshell, you need to be under. It is age restricted, unfortunately, under 31 in most cases. In some instances, it's under 35 if you're Irish, Canadian, Danish, or Italian. And soon to be the UK, but we do not have any more information about that, unfortunately, when that could happen. But it will happen for the UK guys with the free trade agreement. So we can talk offline more about the working holiday visa, but I really want to spend more time because I think you guys out there are more interested in finding out. I don't fit that mold. I don't fit the working holiday visa. I'm interested in finding out what other options are available to me. So I think if we spend a bit more time on that, we'll probably answer a few more questions.
Yeah, sure. So really, yeah, I mean, if you're over the 31 age bracket or 35, you have children and a partner, and you're looking for a more long-term visa, then the skilled visa is obviously the best option, because that way, for the 189 and the 190, it's a 5-year permanent residency visa. The only downside is that visa is currently taking about a year to process. So if you're looking to go, you know, not straight away, but in a year or 2 years, then that's a very good option for you. And as Rowan said, they're talking to a lot of employers in Australia to try and get them set up to be a standard business sponsor, where they're able to sponsor teachers. So that would be the 482. So that would give you the opportunity to be sponsored by an employer or a school in Australia from 1 year up to 4 years, and working for that employer. And that also can be used as a stepping stone visa, where that can also lead on to permanent residency as well. So it's only a 4-year temporary visa, but once you've worked for that employer for a period of 3 years, they do have the right then to sponsor you onto PR. But we can run through a little bit more in depth in those on the slides coming up. And if you have any questions about any of those, please send them through to us. And as Ryan's just put up there, you can talk a bit about that, Ryan, but if you're going to apply for a skilled visa, you have to have a skills assessment through AITSL, and that's basically the requirement there that you need to get a positive skills assessment.
I've actually got their website. I looked at it earlier just so people can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, great.
So this is the skills assessment service that works with immigration. So you would need to, you know, we're not, ANZ UK don't decide whether your qualifications are okay or not to be sponsored. It's up to a governing body like AITSL. If you come from a country that's not the UK, US, Canada, Ireland, there's a few others that I can share with you, but typically you need to get your qualifications assessed through AITSL. So that's that website there. And maybe Anika, you just want to talk a bit more about this, just quickly around what typical qualifications we work with that do get recognised.
Yeah, so what we come across quite a lot as well is just the necessary qualifications, especially for teaching registration. So to be able to teach in Australia, you also need a registration within the individual state that you're going to be in. So on top of the AITSL, you need to have that assessment as well. So the qualifications that we usually see are accepted are the 4-year Bachelor of Education. So that would grant you teaching rights to be able to teach in Australia. We also have educators teaching with us that have a 3-year Bachelor of Education along with a PGCE or PGDE, or you can also have a 3-year Bachelor of Education or a 3-year undergrad in, you know, any subject really, and then a Master of Education or Teaching on top of that. So those are the skills that you'll need to be able to, are the qualifications that you'll need to be able to teach in Australia.
You basically need a total of 4 years minimum across your university qualifications, which must include a teaching master's or a a Bachelor of Education. It has to have a teaching component, obviously, and it has to have a minimum of 45 days of observed teaching during your qualification. So most courses should have a minimum of 45. But if you have those, you're most likely accepted via the state teaching registration authorities. But if you don't, we'll talk offline about that because it won't be applicable to everyone. But we've got some costing in here because I guess I talked to Darren about this the other day. This is a huge move for a lot of you guys. You know, relocating to the other side of the world. Depending on where you are right now, it's a huge move, and you might have family, as Darren said before. And I guess you've got to show commitment because, as Darren said, not everyone's going to get visas. Not everyone's going to get those into the country. We certainly want the workforce to grow, but not everyone will be welcome. It'll be you've got to have the certain skill level that's required to get into the country. So there's a few barriers to get through with getting your qualifications recognised by AITSL, which is $1,000 Australian for that to happen. That's not for everyone, but that is probably for a lot of people that aren't from our typical countries where our offices are based in. And then there's the teacher registration in each state that Anika talked about before. So it's anywhere between $100 and $170 per year to Victoria or New South Wales. And if you're an early childhood educator, it's around $118. So, you know, in addition to that, and Darren will talk about the cost of the visas and the cost the school incurs and the cost you would incur. But I guess you've got to really be committed to this opportunity. You sort of can't be in it half-heartedly. You've really got to say, like, it's not something you can do for 6 months. It's not something where you can work in multiple schools every 3 days a week. It's going to be something that you have to be fully immersed in, and knowing that it's going to cost a bit of money for this adventure to happen for you, and it's going to cost the school a bit of money too, investing in you. So I guess if you're really unsure about things, you really need to reassess and think, like, is this the best move for me? Because it will be an investment. It'll be an amazing experience if it happens for you. But you will need a bit of finance behind you to be considered for this adventure. Did you say that, Darren? Is that a fair enough summation of that?
Yeah, definitely, Rowan. I mean, the best thing is really, if you're thinking about migrating to Australia under one of the skilled visa categories, I suggest you just fill out our online calculator, and it gives you actual points, and that comes through to one of our registered agents. And then we can look at that and ascertain and make sure that you are eligible first. So you're not going down the pathway of spending this money and then 3/4 of the way down you go, oh, I don't meet the points, or there's a medical issue or something else that we can sort out for you before you start. So the first thing is to try and get acknowledgement from a registered agent, make sure that you are eligible for the particular visa you're going for. Then you know that you're not wasting money on spending on the skills assessment, the English language test, etc. So that's the first stage. So once you've decided that you want to work in Australia and live in Australia and you're committed and you've got the funds and you know that you are eligible, then it's really just going through the process. And as I said earlier, it's approximately taking about a year for that process to come through. But once you've got that visa, the best thing about it is it's valid. You usually have 12 months to enter Australia. So if it takes a year to get the visa, you've then got another year to go out to Australia and activate that visa. So it gives you a window, of 12 months. And then once you go to Australia and activate your permanent residency visa, skilled visa, it's then a 5-year visa. So you can come in and out of Australia. So if you're not ready to go now, you could always get your visa, go to Australia, activate it, come back to the UK or Italy, wherever, spend 1 or 2 years, and then go back and live the rest of your days in Australia. So it's quite flexible in that way. So if you are eligible now and you can get the visa, we often say get it, because you never know down the track you may not become eligible, or that visa option may not exist.
Sorry, Dad, can we just differentiate between the difference between a skilled visa and a sponsored visa, like
Sure.
around whether you need a job before you go or not? I think we just need to clarify that.
Yeah, sure. So the skilled visa is where you do the skills assessment, the English language test. You have a minimum of 65 points to apply for the visa. You apply to the Australian government, you lodge an expression of interest through Skill Select. Once you're invited by the Australian government, you get your visa, then you go to Australia. It's not employee reliant. That's basically an independent visa. You may be state sponsored, but it's independent of an employer. The 482 employee sponsored visa is where you would send your CV through to ANZ UK. They have an employer in Australia. They do a technical Skype interview and they say, yes, we want to sponsor you to come and work for this school, say in Victoria. And then they would sponsor you usually on a 4-year visa, which is a 4-year temporary visa, and then you'd be tied to that employer. So you'd fly out to Australia on your 482, 4-year temporary visa, you land in Australia, you work for that employer for up to a period of 4 years if you want. After 3 years, if you want to get PR and that employer is happy with you, then you can apply for the permanent visa. So that's the two differences. So does that sort of cover that for your own?
Yeah, so just in a nutshell, a skilled worker visa, you don't need a job before you go.
Yep,
A
that's
sponsored
right.
visa, you have to have a job before you go. And I think it's important also to note the skilled visas are age restrictive, aren't they, Darren?
Yeah, they're up to the age of 45. So you have to be invited by the Australian government before you turn 45. The 482 employee sponsored visa, there's no age restriction.
Right.
But say you were a 48 or a 50-year-old teacher, you would have to have a submission on why they would give you an age exemption, because it should really be 45. But for example, if it's a rural school, say in Northern Territory, where not a lot of people want to go and work, and there's a huge demand for teachers and they can't supply it, then you would get an age restriction exemption on that. You could go work for that employer, just as an example.
Yep. So I just skipped over something before, but yeah, if anyone is a primary teacher out there, they are eligible to apply for the state sponsorship skilled worker visa. Is that right?
Yeah, so primary school teacher is on the short-term skilled occupations list, whereas a secondary school or an early years is on the main list. The difference being primary school can only get up to 2 years on the employee-sponsored visa with an extension of another 2 years, and a primary school teacher must be state-sponsored if applying for a skilled visa.
Okay, so I think we'll have a mix of teachers out there. We've got Bajit just said she's a science teacher, and I can almost guarantee that STEM subjects that would be on the long-term list, right, Darren?
Yeah, correct. So basically, when you get your skills assessment done through AITSL, they basically go on your qualification. So we often have a lot of people say, oh yeah, but I'm teaching as a secondary school teacher, but my qualification was in primary. So your skills assessment would be as primary. It doesn't matter about the work experience. So that's quite critical when you're lodging a skilled visa. But if she's a science teacher, I'd assume that she'd be working in secondary school. So that'd be on the main list.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, those science, technology, English, maths, they're the high demand subject areas. I'd say if you were art, performing arts, music, it'd be hard. We don't get that many opportunities to place educators in those subjects. So it's social studies and yeah, STEM subjects most likely. But also, this is pretty timely too, because special needs teachers, special educational needs, SEN, is a high demand area for us. We work with a number of schools that would book 30 teachers every day if they could, and they're throwing money, ridiculous money, at educators that have special needs qualifications or experience. So if you do have training in special needs or you do have qualifications in special needs, that would also be considered for the as one of the visa options as well, right, Darren?
Yeah, correct. And just on that point, for the skilled visa, when you get a skilled visa, it's not job specific. So when you get to Australia, say for example, you're a secondary school teacher, if you want to go into a different area, SEN or early childhood, etc., it's not restricted to that. So you can do whatever you want. Whereas on the employee sponsored, it's specific. So if you're sponsored out on a certain occupation, then you have to be working in that occupation on the employee sponsored. the skilled visa, you can basically do whatever you like once you've got that particular visa.
Right. And I think that the prerequisite is that you must have a minimum of 2 years work experience in that occupation. So this wouldn't be applicable to graduate teachers, would it?
No, so for the employee sponsored, you have to have a minimum of 2 years work experience, post-qualification work experience to be eligible for the 482 visa. Whereas the skilled visa, you don't have to, but it would be more of a state government requirement where they would say, look, we'll sponsor teachers to come to Victoria, New South Wales, Western Australia, if they have a minimum of 2 years work experience. So that's a different requirement.
Yep. Great. So if there's any other questions, please send them through. Anything else we need to talk about on this slide?
Not really. It's just really letting people know that in this year's allocation of skilled visas, yeah, it has increased by nearly 80,000. So that's quite substantial.
Yep.
And just to let people know out there, before the financial year in Australia is the 1st of July, so that's when all the Australian government allocates all the state governments the new allocations to be able to sponsor people. And in May and June, we had, I think it was 15 secondary school teachers all received state sponsorship from New South Wales government. And we've lodged all their visas. So those 15 teachers, probably within the next 3 to 6 months, will all have their visas and be heading out to New South Wales to teach. So it is possible, and we are seeing good results on teachers getting state sponsorship and being able to move to Australia.
So just to clarify, the skilled visas are currently taking between 9 and 12 months to process.
Yeah, correct. Because you've got to do the skills assessment, English language, medicals, criminals, the Australian government have got to process it, etc. So yeah, that's a good time scale at the moment.
And the sponsorship visas, if a school has got a sponsorship license as a standard business sponsor, how long would it take? So say, for example, some of our educators that are online today, we managed to get a virtual interview happening between a school in Australia that is a sponsor and themselves in their home country, and they get a job offer on the back of that interview. How long, if that school had your support, how long would it take for that educator to have that sponsorship visa activated so they could come and start working in Australia?
Well, recently we would have said about 2 to 3 months if the school was already approved as a standard business sponsor. But since the Immigration Minister has come out and said he's prioritising those types of applications, it could be anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks. The turnaround can be very, very quick because they're getting priority. Australia needs teachers under the 482. So yeah, that turnaround will be very quick. And you can also include your partner and children in that application as well. When you're approaching the school, all you have to do is ask them to include them in the application, so you can bring a whole family out on the employee-sponsored visa as well.
So if we look at everyone online today that are thinking about their timeline and when they might want to arrive, I'm going to suggest that the way the school year operates in Australia, just to revisit that, it starts in February, ends in December, and then the summer holiday happens, and then the next academic year kicks off. So what I would suggest, anyone out there that is looking, saying, yeah, I want to be sponsored, I'm not going to wait, a year, I want to go sooner than that. I would say the soonest, or the commencement date that we could probably get at the earliest point would be January, February of next year. I don't think it'd be reasonable to think that we could get you into a role, particularly that late in the academic year in November or December. So just so you guys can get your head around this, I think January, February 2023 would be the earliest point that we could get you work. And that's through sponsorship, obviously not through the skilled visa applications that Darren's talking about. That would be a bit longer. That would be a prospect of maybe term 2 next year, which is after Easter or the middle of 2023. So that's the timelines that I think you guys need to get your heads around. I wanted to give you an update around Darren and I caught up. We catch up regularly. I caught up with our permanent opportunities team in Australia recently too. So that permanent opportunities team are, I think, about 40 strong across the country. They all work with independent schools, Catholic schools, and private schools, mainly, not so many government schools, because they're the ones that are more willing to sponsor, I guess, at this point, and able to sponsor. And they are finding out, you know, how many of the schools we currently work with have got licenses to sponsor overseas trained educators. So we've got a number of schools. The guys are getting back to me saying, yes, we've got schools that have sponsored in the past that are willing to sponsor again. We've also got schools that have never sponsored before that want to sponsor, that know they need to sponsor. They can't find the educators locally. They need to get a license. And that's where Darren is going to step in and hopefully support a lot of these schools that are understanding they need to and want to employ educators from Sweden, from the UK, from India, wherever it might be. So we're currently working through that, and that list is growing of interest in becoming a sponsor. So that's great news. And lots of those schools will say, I want to, you know, we're happy to have an interview, a virtual interview with any educators that we think could be a good fit for our school and our location. And this could be anywhere. This could be regional Australia. It could be a metropolitan area, but most typically they will be out of cities. So get your head around that as well. You can't necessarily pick and choose where you want to go. It'll be a school in northern New South Wales needs an educator with your skill set. So you can't be too flexible as to where you want to go. You've really got to you know, be agile around that. So lots of the schools, or some of the schools, will say, I'd like to see some CVs of educators you've got that are abroad at the moment. They'll look at the CVs, they'll look at the notes we've made from our consultation with you as well, what you're seeking, what your strengths are, and then they'll make a decision. They'll say, we want to talk to this educator who's based in Ireland or wherever they might be. Can we arrange an interview? They look amazing on paper. We want to have a conversation with them. And we prepare you for interview. We make sure you know what kind of questions you'll be asked, what questions you should be asking as well by our perm team. And you'll have that interview, and all going well, you'll impress the panel who are interviewing you. And some of these schools will be in a position to say, we want to offer you a contract. We want to offer you sponsorship right here, right now. We have a license to sponsor, or we're about to get one. We want to sponsor you. And that's again where Darren would step in and support the school, and certainly support you in your journey to get to Australia. Some schools will say, and understandably so, will say, oh, look, we really want to meet the educator. We really want to see them on the ground first. And that's difficult if you need sponsorship, obviously, because you need that sponsorship to get into Australia. But what we will talk about on the final slide is a way around that, and I'm interested in unpacking that a bit further. But there is an opportunity for you to still come to Australia and be interviewed, but not necessarily have sponsorship before you go. So as I said, the schools could be anywhere. Most typically in regional rural areas. And as Darren said, the timelines are for sponsorship, looks like they're getting smaller and smaller, which is fantastic. So January jobs at the earliest for sponsorship, middle of 2023 for those skilled visa applications as well. Is that right, Darren? I hope I haven't misinformed anyone with that.
No, that's great. So I mean, the other thing too is a lot of people say, oh, well, I've applied for one visa. Can I apply for another one? So, for example, if you get an interview with ANZ UK, the interview goes really well. The company or the employer says, look, we really like to see you face to face. It is an option to go out to Australia on a tourist visa, because most people can get a tourist visa for 3 months. If you go to the interview and they absolutely love you and say, look, we're approved as a standard business sponsor, we can lodge your application with Darren, you can stay in Australia, and we can lodge the 482 there and then. So what happens then is, once the 482 is lodged, you would then go on to a bridging visa, which means that if your tourist visa expires whilst you're in Australia, whilst the other visa is coming through, you'd still be able to stay legally in Australia. I mean, you can't work until your tourist visa expires, but as soon as that expires, then you get full work rights on the bridging visa A. Or if you haven't, you can apply for work rights. And you can stay and work for that employer. But sometimes you can use some visas as a stepping stone visa to get to another visa. The other thing I'd like to say as well, there may be some educators out there who are married with 3 children going, well, I don't really want to go half around the world on a temporary visa tied to an employer. But you can start out that way. You can also do the skilled visa in the background. So once you get to Australia, you're working with your employer in northern New South Wales or regional Victoria for 6 to 12 months. You could have lodged your permanent skilled visa in the background, and when that comes through, you and your whole family have permanent residency in Australia, and you can still continue to work with that employer. So it's a win-win situation. So you can mix and match a lot of the visas to meet your needs and the employer's needs.
So I think in this instance, if we found some schools that were very keen to interview you, but they really needed to see you in person, that was just something we couldn't get around, they wouldn't interview you via a Skype or a FaceTime, then we'd be very clear with you to say, look, you could come on a tourist visa. We've got 3 schools that want to interview you across different regions or different locations. We think and we feel confident that you'll get at least one offer of sponsorship from those 3. However, there is no guarantee, absolutely no guarantee, but we just feel based on your CV and the conversations we've had with the school and the preparation we can put into your interview, that if you do decide to come on a tourist visa to Australia, understanding that you can't work, understanding there's accommodation costs, you're not getting paid, there is a risk that you will leave Australia 2 weeks later with no job offer, but possibly have a job offer like Darren is saying, and certainly be able to stay in the country whilst that the bridging visa and the sponsorship is going through. And if you understand the risks, and we've informed you as best we can around, we've got 2 or 3 interviews with schools we think will absolutely love you in person and you will get it, understanding that they may not, then that is a decision that you need to think about with your family, or if you're traveling by yourself, that is another opportunity. So at the very least, you have a holiday in Australia, I guess. You could look at it that way, the silver lining to it. But that is another opportunity, just because you got to put yourself in the mindset of a school. Some of them, it is a big risk for them to employ someone they've never met before, and hopefully you do align with the student, staff and culture of the school. But if you don't, they're in a bit of a pickle because they've had to pay a lot of money for sponsorship, and you're in a bit of a pickle too because it's not a school that you feel comfortable in. So there's always a bit of risk involved, but that is one way that we can mitigate schools that are insisting they must meet educators face to face. So as I said, there's a growing number of schools that are saying, no, we're happy to do a Skype interview, that's fine. But some will say, no, we will sponsor, but we need to meet the people face to face. So that as long as you're aware of the risks and we inform you as much as we can about the types of interviews and the types of schools we get you in front of, then everyone's expectations are aligned, I guess. So I think Darren's covered a couple of things here already about traveling with partners and family, as some people will be. Darren, is in a nutshell, like what would be the costs for someone who's coming on a sponsored visa, solo or with say a partner and a child?
Yeah, well, it depends on the employer, but we're finding that probably 90% of the employers are covering all the costs. So the employee-sponsored visa is obviously the cheapest option for educators overseas. But the costs for an individual, that employer would approximately be paying anywhere between, say, 10,000 Australian dollars to about 12,000 Australian dollars just in government fees to actually get that visa over the line for the individual. And then if you add, a partner and a couple of children, you could be looking at another 4,000 Australian dollars on top of that. Under Australian law, the Australian visa fees have to be paid by the employer. The only thing that is not paid by the employer, if they insist on it, is the visa fees, and that's approximately about 2,700 per adult. and 695 Australian dollars per child under the age of 18. So if an employer in Australia is one of those that pay all the fees, then basically there's no visa fees to pay. Or worst case scenario, if they say, look, we want to see a bit of a commitment from you, would you mind paying the visa fees for 2 adults and 2 children? You'd probably be looking about 7,000 Australian dollars just on the visa fees.
Well, that's great news. Most of the schools are happy to cover most of the cost, and the educator only has, you know, as you say, it could be 2,000, it could be 5,000. That's actually a lot less than I thought, and it's great news that schools are happy to pay for all those government fees of sponsorship and licensing. What about I spoke with an educator yesterday about she's currently in China and on some kind of sponsored visa, and she said that every year she's required to undertake a medical examination to fulfill these obligations. Is that similar in Australia, or is there only one that you need to do before you get to Australia, or none?
Yeah, it depends on which country you come from and where you've travelled through on the medical. So, for an example, say a UK educator's going out on a 482 employee sponsored visa, it's highly unlikely that they'd have to do a medical. But it's really down to the Australian government. So if you've travelled through a country that's got TB or high risk, then a medical will be requested in general terms. But I think because most of the teachers will be working in an environment with other children and that, it is likely that a medical will be requested. And it's usually just a chest x-ray and a full medical, you know, bloods, etc. And that would be for anyone under the age, anyone included in the application, so partner and children as well.
Okay. And
I don't know why she's getting a medical every year, because once you first done it, if it's a 4-year visa, then you clear for those 4 years. So I don't know the circumstances behind that one.
No, it's different from country to country, I'm assuming. Just another quick question. So just to remind people, the skilled visa, the skilled work visa, where you don't need a job before you go, that is absolutely the cost of the educator, and it's around $4,000 something, I believe.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the fees have just gone up. I mean, if you're doing the skilled visa, which is without the sponsorship of the employer, say a state-sponsored 190, then you'd have to get your skills assessment for AITSL, which is 1,050. You'd have to pay for your state sponsorship fee, which depends on which state. It starts from $200 up to $700. You'd have to do an English language test. If you come from an English-speaking country, people say, well, why do I have to do the English test? It's more about getting more points. So depending on the score that you get, gives you more points. And the more points you have, the better chance you are of being invited to apply for the visa. So it's not necessarily that you don't have good English language skills, it's about getting your points. Yeah, and that's about 390 Australian dollars. Once you've done that and you lodge your expression of interest and the Australian government invites you, that's when the big fees hit. So it's about 4,270 for the main applicant. Your partner is half of that, so approximately about 2,800. And for every child, it's about 1,100 Australian dollars. So that would be your government fees, and then you've got to do your medicals, which can vary anywhere between 600 to 700 per adult, and half of that for a child, and your criminals. So if you lived in any country in the last 10 years for longer than 12 months, you'd have to get a police clearance from that country.
Yep. Yeah. So, yep.
So a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children on a skilled visa, you would not get a lot of change out of probably anywhere between 16 to 18,000 Australian dollars. But that's a permanent visa, which allows you to work and live virtually anywhere in Australia.
Right, and that's you don't need a job to come for that. That's
correct.
It takes up to 12 months to process.
It does. I mean, a lot of people always ask about the 189, but we only see about 10% of our clients getting that visa because it's capped and you have to have very high points, usually around about 95 to 100. Yep. So the majority of our clients are going state-sponsored because it drops the points down to 65 points, and it's still a 5-year permanent residence visa. It's just easier to apply for that visa, which is the 190. And then you've also got your family sponsored and regional sponsored, which is the 491 visas.
Right. And there's another question here around pay rates. And look, to be honest, it varies depending on whether you're a graduate or an experienced educator. The more experience you have, the higher it goes up. So I can tell you, graduate educators in Australia, straight out of university, earn, I think it's 72,000 Australian dollars per annum. And then it goes up based on experience. So if you're an experienced special education teacher with a master's degree and you've got experience on top of that, you'd earn anything from, it could be 80 to 120,000 per annum Australian dollars. So, but we can talk offline. Everyone's case is going to be different depending on what kind of teacher they are. But pay rates in Australia are typically high. Cost of living is higher too, but Australian teachers are some of the highest paid teachers in the world. I know that because I've travelled and taught in a number of other countries as well. Anika, is there anything else? Sorry, we've kind of not forgotten about you. I know you're there. Is there anything else that any questions or any sort of content or themes that you speak to with educators about that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I suppose it's just kind of what I do get quite a bit of questions from kind of different educators, whether they're early childhood, special education, secondary. So we get a lot of the questions around, you know, what are my chances of being sponsored? So I guess that comes back to, you know, kind of what it is that you're teaching as well. But I don't think there's anything else. I think we've kind of covered most of the questions that I get. I think it's, yeah, just a lot around, are the chances for sponsorship, and, you know, how do we go about that? So I think, you know, having that the tourist visa option is great for that. Do we have, I don't know, we kind of briefly touched base on early childhood. Do you have any more information on, you know, what are the chances of early childhood educators getting sponsored?
Is that a shortage list, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, child educators, yeah. I mean, to be honest, what I'm seeing from Australia and what employers are saying to me is there's shortages in all categories of occupations. So there's bound to be a shortage somewhere in Australia for any particular teaching job or educator job. So I think really it's just obviously speaking to yourselves. You can have some feedback from your employers, and those who get a working holiday visa get out to Australia, because once you're there, it's a lot easier to sit in front of someone and find out what the opportunities are. And those that aren't eligible for that particular visa, then obviously speak to yourselves, you know, Rowan and Anika. I mean, Anika, what are you finding? You're based in the UK, so what are your educators saying to you? Do they want a job to go to first, or are they just looking to move their family to Australia on a permanent visa?
It's a good mixture at the moment. So there's a lot of educators looking to go kind of casually, just, you start on the working holiday visa, but a good number of those educators as well are, you know, open to staying longer. They're like, I think I'm going to love it. I would like to ideally stay for the next 5 years. So we are getting a lot of questions around, you know, while I'm there, what are my chances of sponsorship? And you know, again, like we were saying before, you know, if you're teaching one of the STEM subjects, if you are teaching SEN, you know, those areas where there's that really high demand, there's also obviously better chances. But it's a really good mixture of educators wanting that to be there for a year or two, or wanting to stay long term. I've also had a lot of interest as well from people who want to just make the move and have those jobs right away. So yeah, to have those options for those different circumstances is really helpful.
I think now is a great time if you're an educator overseas and you want to work and live in Australia. It's perfect because the Australian government are prioritising visas. There's more visas available this year in the actual allocation. There's nearly 80,000 more skilled visas and employee-sponsored visas. Employers are prepared to pay for your visa to get to Australia. There's huge demand. The wages are great. I mean, wish I was earning 100, 120 grand a year. So it's all positive. So if you are thinking of coming to Australia, it's all in your favour. So So yeah, I mean, have a chat to Rowan and Anika and see what jobs are available, how many employers, what they require, what are they looking for, and yeah, we can certainly help you with your visa because you're in demand and it's a great time to go live in Australia.
If we've got some questions here. If I'm a primary school teacher and I get a state-sponsored visa, do I have to work in a public school or can I work in independent schools as well?
That would come down to your licensing. As long as you've got your licensing requirements in Australia, which obviously you guys help with or can do, there's no restriction at all.
No.
It's really funny because you go out on a skilled visa as a primary school teacher, but once you get to Australia, there's no restrictions. You can drive a taxi, you can go lay on the beach, enjoy the sun. It's unrestricted. So, yeah, the world's your oyster. So, yeah, get into it and do what you like.
Another one here. I'm currently a PE teacher in England. I understand the demand for PE teachers is not the same as the science, technology, and English math teachers, but is there still any chance of me getting sponsorship, or am I more likely to get through the door by going down the cover route and then looking for permanent jobs whilst there? Well, I would suggest that if you can enter on a working holiday visa, absolutely do that. Get known amongst schools and get history with schools, and then you've got more of a chance of getting sponsorship as a PE teacher. I'm not saying there's not opportunity to get permanent opportunities through, as a PE teacher. We definitely placed PE teachers in the past, but there are a lot of PE teachers in Australia. Even though there is a shortage of teachers in general, a lot of them are PE trained that we do have. So it's not a high demand area, but in saying that, you know, if we put you in front of an independent Catholic private school for a PE blended role in humanities or whatever it might be, you could very well still get offered sponsorship if you're the right fit for that role. So never say never. It's just a bit more of a not a high demand area. What else is there? Someone here has 11 years teaching experience in the UK, college teaching science. I have a DTLLS, adult training education instead of a PGCE. What are my chances? Do you know how to answer? Would you like to answer that one, Anika, or is that more of an AITSL question?
I think that one would come down to the 8SL, the AITSL, to have your skills assessed. I haven't come across that qualification yet, so I'm not entirely sure if that would be accepted by 8SL or the teaching registrations. So it'd be worth checking with one of those bodies to see if that allows you to have the full teaching rights.
And I would suggest probably, I was thinking about maybe we could go through the Victorian Institute of Teaching first because it is cheaper, I guess, and they might say yes, which means you wouldn't have to go through 8SL. But if you need sponsorship, I think you'd still need to go through 8SL, right, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, for the 482, as long as you can obtain your registration and licence to teach in Victoria, then you don't need the skills assessment for the 482. You only need the skills assessment if you're going through the permanent route. Yeah. So.
Okay.
So you're right. If you're going to Victoria, I'd make inquiries about the licensing or registration to be able to teach there first. And once you tick that box, then hey, you're on your way for the employee sponsored. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we can talk to each individual out there with your own unique questions and circumstances, because some people have got different types of qualifications, and again, we're not the ones that say yes, this is the right one, or no, it's not. It is up to each state to manage that. And as we said, it could cost between $100 and $180 to register with each state, but they're the ones that would say yes, we recognise your qualification, or no, we don't. And then I'd go to 8SL for clarification, but that is $1,000 on top of it. So that's why I'd always go probably to the state ones first. So a good example I can share with you, it's a couple of Swedish educators that are in Melbourne right now, applied for their Victorian Institute of Teaching registration from Sweden. They studied English and Swedish in Lund, and they sat an English exam like you need to if you come from one of those non-English speaking countries as a mother tongue. They passed it, no worries. They got the score they needed to. They paid their $160. They're teaching in Melbourne right now. So you know, I think most qualifications should be recognised as long as you hit that 4-year minimum mark of a combination of a bachelor and a master's or a diploma. Anything less than that, if you've only got 3 years, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, no, you're right. And really, they've got to demonstrate they've completed the 45 days of supervised teaching practice. I mean, I'm just reading straight here off our website because we deal with a lot of UK teachers, and it's got here, this must be within the range of the students relevant to your nominated occupation. Work experience does not count towards supervised teaching practice. Employment-based routes into the teaching profession, such as the Graduate Teacher Program, GTP, and or School-Centred Initial Teacher Training, SCITT, are not recognised as suitable by AITSL unless the program results in a formal award with an academic transcript and a statement of supervised teaching practice, or issued by the institution awarding the qualification. So, yeah, there's a few boxes there you do have to tick, and it's on our website if you want to find out. But some of those GTP-based programs don't get through AITSL. But you are right, it's a minimum of 4 years, whichever way you do it.
Yep, and I think most transcripts would also say how many practicum days, placement days you completed during your study, which is also important. Another question based on the working holiday visa. It's great that some people are eligible for it, but you certainly can start working straight away in Australia on a working holiday visa as long as you're registered with the right state. Like whether it's a VIT, you can do that before you arrive. If it's New South Wales, you can't do that before you arrive. So there's a 6-week application period that you won't be able to teach for if you arrive in Sydney. And then there's the specified work extend your visa by another year if you do 88 days of specified work. So we'll again talk to you individually around that because it's not going to be applicable to everyone online today. Any other questions, Anika? I can only see a few here, but you might see more.
No, I've got any other questions on that.
There's yeah, look, languages are in high demand too. Someone's got a question around that. So, you know, not every language, but typically I think French and Spanish might be in the ones that are offered across lots of schools in Australia. I know that in my school that I went to, that those two were offered. I wouldn't say Swedish is offered, unfortunately. I wish it was. I would have taken it, but it's typically the German, Spanish, French, maybe Italian. In Australia, it's Indonesian because of the neighbouring countries in Australia, Japanese, Mandarin. But yeah, again, we can talk through offline around that. But we've captured all your questions. If we haven't answered them today, we will get back to you and answer them. And certainly feel free to reach out to Darren. I think we've got your contact details here, haven't we, Darren? I think we had them up at the start.
At the start.
Yep. So he's got the visa assessment, a free visa assessment calculator or points calculator, an assessment tool that Darren's got, and I've seen lots of educators use that in the past. If people want to email you, Darren, are you happy if I put that in here as well?
Yeah, sure. Just my name, darren.chat@visagoaustralia.com.
Okay. So if people want to get some expert advice off Darren, feel free to reach out to him. But thank you to everyone. Thank you, Anika. Thank you, Darren, for your expert advice. Thanks for joining us during the summer period for a lot of you on your holidays. As I said, things are always changing around sponsorship and around demand of educators, and more schools across Australia are understanding they need to look outside of Australia to find the right type of educators for their school. So opportunities are growing and process times are shrinking, as Darren said. So it is probably a great time to be considering these kinds of opportunities. And again, think about your timeline around sponsorship, January roles at the earliest, around skilled visas, maybe middle of 2023 at the earliest. So you can start planning and talking with your family about what's best for you. And again, it would be a minimum of maybe 1 year I wouldn't be, if you're thinking you only want to be in Australia for a shorter period of time, it's probably not going to happen as a sponsored visa. Schools, they're making an investment in you, so they're not going to just offer you a 6-month contract. I'd say that'd be highly unlikely. So, anything to finish up on, Darren, before we let people go? And Anika?
No, from my side of things, no. I mean, like I said earlier, it's a good time to get in and get your visa and get out to Australia and just enjoy the lifestyle that Australia offers. It's second to none. I can't wait to head back in mid-September. So looking to get back on my surfboard and catch a few waves. So because there's definitely none here in Edinburgh, that's for sure.
No.
But yeah, good opportunities, like we said. So yeah, just jump on board and go for it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we have all your contact information out there. You'll get a recording of this as well, so you can relive the magic in your own time or share it with any friends or family. And looking forward to unpacking your specific preferences and requirements one-on-one. And as we said, Darren's more than available. Feel free to reach out to him too if you've got more sort of you need more expert visa knowledge or migration knowledge. He's the expert. We're not on that, unfortunately, but we're great. It's great that we have Darren here. So thanks again. Anika, anything before we sign off?
No, just want to kind of echo what Darren was saying. It's a great time to go. Lots of work available, and it's an awesome country. So if you can do it because you won't regret it. So yeah, happy to help you out with that process and that journey as well.
Fantastic. Thanks again to everyone out there. Stay well and